Thank you very much. Hopefully, folks, you can hear me. I'm a little bit croaky. I think I've been talking too much this week. But thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, Paul, for the introduction. Very pleased to be here today to try to give you an outline of the Sustainable Agriculture Programme. I'll not repeat a lot of what Minister said, but I'll try and pick up as we move through. In case some of you wonder why I'm all connected up, Albert reliably tells me I'm being recorded so that this can be put on the Supporting Agri Professionals website for others who are unable to be here today to be able to hear the presentation. So we have a new Sustainable Agriculture Programme, really renamed to relay its importance, as Minister said, in supporting change for a sustainable future for agri-food and the environment in Northern Ireland, and the key role it has to play in delivering Minister's priorities, departmental priorities, but also programme for government priorities and indeed wider priorities around that. Minister spoke a lot about the budget, so all I want to do is really to indicate that the budget that was announced on our budget announcement around the draft budget on the 19th of December has provided the basis for us as a department to move forward with our plans to roll out the SAP, which has commenced this week. And some of you may have heard and read Minister's written statement that he supplied to the Assembly, or heard reports in the press, because we did a media brief as well. Minister covered the overall aim of the programme, so I won't repeat it. It's up there on the slides, but I won't repeat it and read it out. And very clearly, we've got a lot of new graphics, as you can see from behind me, but also from the diagram of the circles that are up on the slide. In the centre, if can't get my, won't work. Anyway, in the centre, we have a Sustainable Agriculture Programme. Minister mentioned sort of resetting of the 4 outcomes. They haven't changed significantly, but they're changed sufficiently to address the Minister's priorities in terms of improved environmental sustainability, enhancing productivity, stronger resilience, and an effective functioning supply chain. Minister, I think you touched on all of the names of the schemes that are in the wider circle. What I hope to do during the rest of this presentation is to give you a whistle-stop tour of all of those schemes. But really importantly, and Minister again touched on this, are the orange and the lighter orange names and words in the circles. Government has a role to play in communicating this information and influencing change. Farmers and landowners have a role to play, but industry stakeholders, and that's why you're all here today, have a very significant role to play in ensuring that we provide consistent messaging around the objectives and the scheme details to all farm businesses in Northern Ireland. Minister mentions we use a lot of science, it's evidence-based, so science, research, innovation and technology services are really, really important as we move forward. Minister also touched on co-design with stakeholders, so I'll be pretty brief on this slide. Co-design approach, I was relating to some of my team yesterday. I think we started co-design on Future Agricultural Policy Framework way back in 2018. So it's been going for a long time. People have changed, organisations have changed, but our agricultural policy stakeholder group provides a forum for dialogue between the department and the key stakeholders at each stage of the development process. I fully recognise that each organisation doesn't always get what it wants, but most of the time we reach a compromise in terms of the policies, proposals that are presented to the Minister. And the stakeholder views are really, really important to enable the Minister to make the correct decisions. So there has been an important role for APSG, and that will continue as the programme starts to roll out. Whilst we think the programme is rolling out, policy will evolve. We will monitor and evaluate each of the schemes, so policy will continue to evolve and may change with time. In addition, the Carbon Farming Partnership and the Farming with Nature Co-Design Group have also been established within the last 12 to 18 months to ensure that stakeholder views are understood and properly considered during the development of the carbon footprinting project and the Farming with Nature package. Minister indicated that he had agreed a timeline for the rollout of these schemes, and Minister announced that on Wednesday. This timeline is currently available on the departmental website, and information on all of the schemes will be continually populated as we move forward. Probably not a lot there at the minute because all of us are busy communicating, but as we roll forward, information on the schemes will be populated behind this, together with a very useful Q&A, which we will continually update and review. So any of the questions that you asked today we'll record, and we will populate those as a Q&A as well. Don't think that's working, no. If we look at it, Minister has indicated out to 2027 the rollout of the various schemes, and you can see from 2025, 26, 27. We've brigaded these into, as Minister said in his opening remarks, support programmes, data platforms and schemes. Now I'm going to go through each one, or the most of them, so you'll get more detail. But the schemes that are to be rolled out in 2025, not in any particular order, are Farm Sustainability Transition Payment, Beef Carbon Reduction Year 2, Suckler Cow Scheme Year 1, Farming with Nature Transition Scheme, Sustainable Farming Investment Scheme, Farming for Generations, which is already rolled out as a pilot, Horticulture Schemes, Farming for Sustainability Knowledge Transfer, which today is about, supporting the Agri Professionals programme, the Farming for Carbon programme, and the rollout of Zone 4 of the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme. If you didn't get those down, we'll make sure they're populated up onto the website, but there's a very significant effort to roll out new schemes and to deliver new schemes this year. So what I want to do now is to try to take you through, in chunks, each of those schemes. So I'm going to start with the support programmes. And those support programmes are around knowledge transfer, supporting Agri Professionals training, and Farming for Carbon. Now, I'm not going to take you through this slide because Albert tells me he has nearly the identical slide in his presentation. So Albert will talk through the knowledge transfer initiatives, and we'll delay that one to later. In terms of the supporting Agri Professionals, again, I won't say terribly much around this because Minister covered some of it and Albert's going to pick up on it. But we see providing knowledge, both as information, peer-to-peer learning, information sessions, really, really important to try to drive change. Minister mentioned that I think his top priority, Minister, now you may want to correct me, is climate change. I've put up, and I won't read these out either because I hope all of you are familiar with them. These are the obligations contained within the Climate Change Act, which we must meet. So by 2030, we need net emissions to be 48% lower. By 2050, net emissions to be at least 100% lower. And DAERA must prepare and publish Northern Ireland's first climate action plan, setting out policies and proposals to achieve the carbon budget. And as Minister indicated, we hope that won't be in the too distant future, that will come out for consultation. Many of you have seen this slide before in some of our stakeholder events, but I think it is important to put it up today because the Climate Change Committee has provided advice to the Executive and government departments that emissions reductions are to be achieved by the various actions on the left-hand side of the slide. Again, I'm not going to read them all out. The DAERA Farming for Carbon actions to try to achieve the same emissions reductions are presented on the right-hand slide during the first Climate Action Plan. You can see similarity around improving farm productivity or enhancing farm productivity, widespread adoption of low-carbon farming practices, the use of breeding, feeding and management practices, and increased use of biomethane. But there is a slight difference in them. The CCC advice to government is that there needs to be a 22% reduction in dairy cattle, a 17% reduction in beef cattle, and an 18% reduction in sheep, pigs and poultry. The proposals that we have worked through, and many of them are contained within the Sustainable Agriculture Programme as we start to roll that programme out, will deliver the reduction the agriculture sector needs to meet by 2027. The first Climate Action Plan period, by only removing the older non-breeding animals. But we require the uptake, we require the change in farm business behaviour or farmer behaviour. Over on the right hand side, you see reductions in the number of older breeding cattle. We have modelled what that might be, and again, some of you have seen that. That modelled reduction based on current livestock numbers is about 7% reduction in total livestock numbers. But it's around taking out the cow that hasn't calved in 2 years, for example, an inefficient animal. So consultation on the CAP will be in the coming months. As I go forward, I will be talking about age at slaughter. I'll be talking about age at calving and calving interval. I'll maybe not say so much today about reductions in nitrogen fertilizer, etc., but that will be covered in your knowledge sessions moving forward. But you'll see as I go through, there are a series of actions that we are proposing to maintain the output of milk, beef, pigs, poultry, food products in Northern Ireland, but deliver the greenhouse gas emissions. And by so doing, we also reduce the ammonia emissions. Now, those are really, really important points. I probably look forward to having further discussions about that. But we need to get the message out, and we need your help to get the message out. In terms of the data platforms, because I'm conscious I need to keep moving, Minister mentioned this groundbreaking intervention, the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme. Again, you're very familiar, most of you, with the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, so I'll just skip to the next page. It has been running for 3 years, and uptake by farm businesses across Zone 1, Zone 2 and Zone 3 as a whole is over 90%. Zone 4, which is the most of County Antrim, will open for applications later this year. And over 15,000 farm businesses have received their soil analysis results to date. Not only do farm businesses receive their soil analysis results, but they also are receiving LiDAR maps. And in particular, LiDAR maps, and you can see on the screen here, and I apologise at the back, it might be quite small, but you can see yellow and red. The yellow and red in those fields, because that's a map of land parcels, show where the runoff is happening in those farms. And we're making available to every farm business LiDAR maps which show where the runoff risks are. And we will be providing schemes which will help mitigate those runoff risks to try to improve water quality in Northern Ireland. CAFRE is also providing training on how to interpret the soil analysis results and how each farm business can prepare a nutrient management plan. Moving forward, and we'll come back to this, the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme will be a conditionality of payments from 2026 or participation within it. The LiDAR programme also will give an indication or a measure of the carbon stored above ground in hedges, trees, etc. So that will also become very important for farm businesses to understand how much carbon they have stored in their hedges and their trees. Moving on to the next data platform is the carbon footprinting project. This is an industry-led project for all farm businesses across Northern Ireland, supported by knowledge transfer. And Minister mentioned some of the training that's already gone on around carbon footprinting. The objective here is to set a baseline of a carbon footprint on an individual farm business from which to measure and evaluate progress. Both at an individual farm level, at a sector level, be it a dairy or beef sector or a poultry sector, and at regional levels at a Northern Ireland level. This will also become a conditionality of future payments moving forward, and the procurement exercise is ongoing to appoint a carbon calculator currently. The third huge data programme is the Bovine Genetics Project. Aims of the Bovine Genetics Project are to increase the rate of genetic gain and enterprise economic and environmental performance. In layman's terms, this is to enable farm businesses to breed animals, or farmers to breed animals with lower carbon footprints, enhanced productivity, lower pollution potential in terms of nitrogen use efficiency, improved animal health and welfare, including the ability to identify those breeding animals most resistant to TB. There are very, very positive outcomes here for farmers, industry, the taxpayer and government. It will take a while to see the benefits delivered, but it has huge potential. And I know during the question session, I might refer a lot of the questions to Paul. I'm just giving you a warning, Paul, because Paul leads on this particular project. The deliverables from the project are that whilst it will be delivered by DAERA, it is in partnership with the agri-food industry through the not-for-profit organisation or not-for-profit company Sustainable Ruminant Genetics Limited. The deliverables are individual animal potential benchmarking services which will establish a baseline position, identify opportunities for improvement, enable us to measure progress and determine research needs and inform policy development moving forward. So a huge programme with very, very significant and huge potential to deliver improved environmental sustainability and enhanced productivity. That takes me to payment schemes. And this might sound a bit monotonous as I work my way through, but I'm just going to take each of the schemes where we will be trying to incentivise a change in behaviour or a change to a farming practice and take you through each one. The first of those is the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment, which replaces the basic payment scheme for 2025. There are no changes to eligibility, no changes to land eligibility, no changes to minimum claim size, which remains at 3 hectares, and the cross-compliance continues to apply. So you're asking me, what's different? This marks an important step towards the rollout of the full FSP. We're starting on our transition to the new schemes, and this marks the start of it. As we move forward, 2025 is planned to be the last year for applications to the Young Farmers Payment and applications to the Regional Reserve. Ministers taking forward legislation at the minute to put that into law. From the 1st of January 2026, the Department is planning to introduce the Farm Sustainability Payment, FSP. This is an area-based payment with the objective of providing a safety net to farm businesses, because we recognise how important direct payments are to farm business in terms of their farm business income. But for that basic safety net, we're going to require, on a phased-in approach, farm businesses to do a little bit more to help us move in the direction of change we want to go. We're going to implement a historic years exercise to ensure that we are supporting active farmers, and I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. We still have to take Minister's view on this around progressive capping of payments moving forward, and I'll say a little bit more around that. A little bit more around the conditionalities that we're going to put onto the payments. The introduction of new land eligibility rules, which will make all land eligible except hard features, because we recognise that sometimes farmers, in order to activate a payment entitlement on a hectare of land, they're damaging a habitat, and we don't want that to happen anymore. And we're going to replace the EU cross-compliance rules with the new bespoke Northern Ireland Farm Sustainability Standards. There's a lot of change coming in 2026, so we have this year to help us communicate all of that change. The first one is the historic years. To be eligible for farm sustainability payment in 2026, a farm business will need to have had farm livestock registered on its holding in 2020 or 2021, in either of those 2 years, or had at least 3 hectares of determined land area recorded as an arable or horticultural crop in either of the 2 years. We have identified some 2,400 businesses currently who would be impacted by this, and we will soon start to be communicating with those impacted businesses. They do have options, but if they sit and do nothing, they will be ineligible for FSP. And again, we can pick that up in the questions. Progressive capping, and we've discussed this, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this previously. This is a progressive capping of the farm sustainability payment, planned to be introduced above £60,000 over a 2-year period. This is because a larger business, in our view, doesn't need a safety net that keeps increasing just because it has a larger land area. We've looked at the impact of this as well, and again, we can pick it up. So it'll be phased in over a 2-year period. A farm business that today is receiving £190,000, which is the current cap, after the 2-year phase-in period would be receiving £116,000. Hope I've got those numbers right, George. Minimum claim size threshold would remain at 3 hectares. In terms of conditionality, the following will become conditions of the farm sustainability standards or payment. Farm sustainability payment, farmers will have to comply with the new farm sustainability standards, and I will come back to those. Farm businesses will need to participate in the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme and the Carbon Footprinting Project. Those will be phased in, or the proposal is those will be phased in to enable farm businesses to have had the opportunity to comply. If you follow, because not everybody has had the opportunity to comply with all of those. Participation includes registering, undertaking the test or the footprint, and completion of CAFRE training. So it's registering, making sure you do the soil, you actually do the test or they do the footprint, and then completing the training at CAFRE. And that will give you a tick for participation. So it's not terribly onerous. We're not actually asking you to do something about changing your soil indices or your carbon footprint at the beginning. We're trying to create a baseline from which we can move forward. As we go forward, there will also be participation in the Bovine Genetics Project. I think we just need to work out the dates for that. But that participation will also mean joining the project if you have breeding animals, breeding ruminant animals on your farm, and undertaking the training. And then finally, development of a nutrient management plan moving forward. And we just have to work out the phasing of all of this, because we can't ask a farm business to develop a nutrient management plan if they don't have all their soil testing results or had the training to show them how to do it. So we're looking at, and we will be discussing with Minister very shortly, how we phase all of these things in. In terms of controls and assurance, or the replacement for cross-compliance, the new farm sustainability standards, there are 7. Protection of soil, of waters from pollution, of habitats and biodiversity, landscape and heritage, livestock, food, feed, herd health, flock health and biosecurity, welfare and protection of farmed livestock, and livestock identification and traceability. We're also reforming the penalty system, and there will be a new penalty matrix. And I think that has just gone to Minister, or is about to go to Minister for consideration. Sorry, excuse me. Talked about the new approach to land eligibility, where all land except hard features will become eligible, and we will maximise the use of new technology for controls. Some people ask me, what do I mean by that? Well, the eye in the sky will be watching. So we will try and do as much of it, because that reduces our administration costs within the department, and if we make use of ever-evolving IT capability, it reduces the overall administration costs. I put this in because I often get asked about arable farmers and what are we doing for arable farmers. We do have a protein crop scheme which was introduced in 2021, initially for 2 years. It was extended for another 3. Objectives of the protein crop scheme were to create a domestically produced source of protein for animal feed, but given, and realistically, and before David asked me, realistically, given the amounts of imported protein that comes into Northern Ireland, I don't know, I think that was a rather heroic ambition. Provide agronomic benefits within arable rotations and provide an alternative source of income for arable farmers. The protein crop scheme was extended for the 2024-26 scheme years to enable us to complete a further assessment around the environmental and sustainability benefits which protein crops can bring, because we certainly believe growing a protein crop which fixes nitrogen into the ground and which has flowers will help from a biodiversity and a nitrogen use efficiency point of view. Scheme pays around £330 a hectare to cover the cost of growing the crop. Maximum supported area is 1,300 hectares, and that's set to enable us to pay on a hectareage basis. Eligible protein crops are listed there: peas, field beans and sweet lupins. And on the bottom bullet point, you can see that the area of protein crops has increased from 152 hectares in 2020 across 32 farms to 803 hectares in 2024 across 125 farms. It's not for everybody, and I think what we're seeing increasingly is it is being grown in arable rotations. Moving on to the beef sustainability package, I said I would come back to these. These are packages aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, lowering environmental footprint and enhancing productivity. There are two schemes, the beef carbon reduction scheme around reducing age of clean cattle at slaughter, and the suckler cow scheme reducing age at first calving and calving interval. To be eligible for support under the beef sustainability package, claimants must also be in receipt of the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment in 2025 and the Farm Sustainability Payment from 2026 onwards. So you must be in receipt of those payments. That is the gateway into the beef sustainability package. Beef carbon reduction scheme commenced, as Minister indicated, on the 1st of January 2024. Year 2 commenced on the 1st of January 2025. All of you will be familiar with the phased implementation over a 4-year period, starting at 30 months, reducing to 26 months. What will this offer us in terms of greenhouse gas emissions? If we can achieve all of these targets, it will take us 25% of the way that we need to on the agriculture sector climate action plan. So it's really, really important that we drive the uptake of these schemes and we drive the behaviour. Payment rate per eligible animal is £75, and that was phased in January. I know there's been a lot of discussion, because I keep getting asked it around where I live. What's the scale back on the payment? Because there's a perception out in the industry that more eligible animals than the quantitative limit of 352,000 animals have been slaughtered. In year 1, the maximum age at slaughter was 30 months. Some 8,100 eligible businesses opted into the scheme. Approximately 295,000 eligible cattle were slaughtered from those businesses that opted in, which means in the spring we will be paying out as a department about 19.8 million to incentivise that. The quantitative limit whereby we would scale back payments is 352,000. So based on that, now those numbers might move a little bit, but they aren't going to move 50,000 cattle. The year 2 maximum age at slaughter is 28 months. Moving on to suckler cow scheme. Suckler cow scheme is there to incentivise farm businesses to increase the percentage of eligible calving events within the Northern Ireland suckler cow herd. By so doing, you enhance productivity and you reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And you do that by achieving a reduction in age at first calving and having a shorter calving interval for your cows. It's now planned that this scheme will commence on the 1st of April 2025. It will run from April to March each year over a 4-year implementation period. It will be closely monitored for any unintended consequences, and payment will be made on eligible calving events that achieve the annual scheme targets for age at first calving or calving interval. A quantitative limit of 222,000 calving events per year will be set in legislation to ensure that the measure is compliant with state aid rules. And again, like the beef carbon reduction, if calving events exceed that, we will scale back the payments. Just because calving events exceed that, it doesn't necessarily mean that suckler cow numbers are going up, but it potentially could, so that will be part of our monitoring. For the suckler cow scheme, farm businesses only need to opt in. That's all they need to do. The rest will be done from departmental records. I won't read this out in any great detail, but these are the age at first calving targets for first calving heifers from 34 months down to 29 months, and the calving interval targets from 415 days to 385 days. And I'm sure Albert will touch on some of the awareness events that CAFRE have planned around helping provide assistance to farm businesses around meeting these targets. Moving on then to one of the Minister's key priority. He's nodding his head. Ambition, as Minister said, is to scale up the Farming with Nature package as quickly as possible. That isn't easy. It's challenging if we look at elms in England and we look at acres in the south, but we have a very committed team working on this, both from a policy and a delivery side. Minister outlined the aim, so I'll just pick up on the principles. The principles are that it's landscape scale, that you don't have to be in receipt of the farm sustainability payment to be able to receive Farming with Nature, that the financial incentives that the department will pay will recognise and reward public goods moving forward. So we're looking to results-based payments. That there will be collaborative participation where appropriate, and schemes will be incentivised to encourage group working, particularly at a landscape level. And we will monitor and evaluate as we go to ensure that we're delivering those results. Minister mentioned introducing this at a phased approach and that he will make further announcements at Balmoral Show. But one of the year one options that's being worked on very, very heavily at the minute is a Farming with Nature transition scheme, where farmers will be incentivised, or farm businesses will be incentivised to plant new hedgerows, create a riparian buffer strip, plant trees, retain their winter stubble, or plant a multi-species winter crop cover. And work is progressing to have that scheme open and launched as quickly as we possibly can. The next phase of Farming with Nature will be landscape projects, where we will ask groups of farmers to collaborate to develop innovative approaches to restore nature at a landscape level in Northern Ireland, almost like a replacement for EFS Group. But we'll go out as a pilot because we want to look at this at a project level and look at landscape project coordinators through a competitive procurement process. Following on from that, and the next phase, we'll look at what we can do around designated sites. And we're working very, very hard at the minute to try to define timetables to meet the Minister's requests. Next one, and I'm very conscious with some banking representatives, the replacement, in many ways the replacement for FBIS, the Farm Business Investment Scheme. This is a sustainable farming investment scheme which provides capital support. And that will support innovation and new technologies to help farm businesses or primary food producers in the agriculture and horticulture sectors to improve environmental performance and business efficiency. The initial focus proposed at the minute is the technology and equipment to help farm businesses reduce ammonia emissions, and Minister mentioned that was one of his priorities, carbon emissions and nutrient losses. Options are being developed with consideration of the level of need of the different sectors and different farm sizes. Initially, this will be almost like the Tier 1 of FBIS with a list of eligible items, and we're hopeful at the minute that that will be open towards the end of 2025. Farming for Generations aims to support farm businesses in planning for a timely and orderly transfer to a new generation. And I think, as Minister indicated, the announcement around inheritance tax has made farm businesses much more conscious of the need to plan. A pilot scheme was launched in October 2024 to provide the farm family with the knowledge and skills to help with the transfer of the management and leadership responsibility and the legal inheritance of the farm business to successor or successors. That scheme is getting off and running. A delivery agent has been appointed, rural support, and many of you might have seen in the press around those workshops. It will also develop the skills of the successor and the retiring farmer to make that transition possible. You'll probably be pleased to hear I'm getting towards the end. Horticulture has tremendous opportunities in Northern Ireland, and I think we saw that during the EU exit process whenever sometimes, well, maybe I went into a supermarket, I went into a supermarket and there were vegetables or fruit missing off shelves because for EU exit they couldn't come into Northern Ireland. So the focus of the horticulture work stream within this is on production agriculture, which is a very diverse area, around creating and developing programs through a collective process and improved supply chain integration, using and providing access to knowledge transfer, innovation support and optimising precision of data. A pilot is planned for later in the year around 3 elements: developing sustainable sector growth groups, that might be for a particular product, and I'm going to say strawberries just to give you an example. So it might be about developing a group who could grow strawberries, providing the innovation drivers and the support that that group growing strawberries need, but also the knowledge that they need, and taking it right through the supply chain. Now, don't be going away and saying we're supporting strawberries, because I'm only using it as an example. Finally, we have an objective to have an effective functioning supply chain, which is really, really important, because there's no point in providing produce if it doesn't have the supply chain there to provide the return to the farmer. So we have a 3-tiered model being developed for supply chain. Now that is much further behind than some of the other measures, and our anticipated commencement date at the minute is 2027, as you would have seen for the timeline. But under it, there would be 3 schemes: a startup, a scale-up, and then a transformation fund, almost in the upside-down triangle. So you would help new groups start, help existing groups grow, and then get supply chain actors to address landscape scale challenges affecting the viability of their sector. Very, very innovative approach, and I think has a lot to offer as we move forward. Brings me to my last slide, I think, Albert, you'll be glad to hear, which leads nicely into yourself. There's a huge amount of information in this, an absolute huge amount. It's complex, it's interlinked, it's a very significant programme of change. So we recognise, and Minister has agreed earlier this week, that we can start to communicate all of this out in awareness sessions or with you. So Albert, I'm going to pass across to. Albert has a number of awareness events planned. I think you'll put a similar slide up in a few minutes. There will be rolling updates on the DAERA websites. We also, and Minister has agreed that we can provide a hard copy newsletter to all farm businesses of the changes coming. We expect that hard copy newsletter might be around the end of March, just subject to procurement and printing, etc. But that will be posted to all farm businesses. Now I think, as I said at the beginning, you all have a role to play in this change, and we all want us to have consistent messaging because we're all dealing with farm businesses. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. Hopefully I haven't run too far over time, Paul, and I'll hand over to Albert. Thank you.